The cowboy didn't say, "I do." He said something else, and every whisper in that church died mid-breath. The floorboards creak under her boots as she counts. 1, 2, 3, 12 steps to the door. The bouquet slips in her grip, petals falling soft against the wood. Somewhere behind her, a cough breaks the silence. Then his voice, low, steady, cuts through the room, but not the words anyone expects. She looks up, just for a second. Then everything shifts. Would you have walked out or stayed? Tell me below. The church at the edge of Dry Creek had been standing longer than most of the people inside it. Wind slipped through the cracked window panes, carrying dust and the dry scent of sage across the narrow aisle. The boards beneath Lila Harper's boots creaked softly each time she shifted her weight, old wood speaking in low complaints. Her dress hung loose on her frame, borrowed from a neighbor who had once been broader in the shoulders. The lace at the sleeves had yellowed with time, and one seam along her side had been mended with thread a shade too dark. When the wind lifted the hem, she caught a glimpse of her worn brown boots, cleaned for the day, but still scarred from years of work. She kept her eyes down. 12 boards. That was the distance from where she stood to the church door. 12 long planks, each one uneven, each one marked with a knot or a crack. She counted them again, slower this time, as if memorizing a path she might need. At the far end of the aisle stood Caleb Ward. He filled the space without moving. Tall, broad through the shoulders, coat dark against the thin light spilling from the window behind him. His hat rested in his hands, fingers still around the brim. He didn't look at her. Not once since she had stepped inside. People filled the pews on both sides. Dry Creek always came out for a wedding, but today felt different. No laughter, no whispered teasing, just the low murmur of voices that didn't quite settle. Lila didn't have to look to know what they were thinking. She felt it in the way the room held its breath. Her father sat in the second row, hat pulled low, hands locked together between his knees. Edgar Harper had not spoken to her since the night before. Not after the paper had been signed. Not after the long silence that followed. The pastor cleared his throat. It cut through the room sharp as a snapped twig. "Do you, Lila Harper," he began, voice dry and practiced, "take this man to be your lawful husband?" Her throat tightened. The boards blurred beneath her gaze. 12 turned to 11, then 10, then nothing at all. For a moment, she could not remember how to lift her head, how to draw breath deep enough to speak. Somewhere behind her, a bench creaked. Her father shifted. She heard his voice as it had sounded the night before. Low, worn thin. "This is the only way, girl. There ain't another." Lila swallowed. "I do." The words came out smaller than she expected. Not quite steady. Not quite whole. A pause followed. Then the pastor turned. "And you, Caleb Ward?" The room leaned in without moving. Caleb lifted his head. It was the first time Lila saw his face clearly that morning. The lines there were not hard the way she had expected. Not soft either. Just set, like something that had been carved and left alone too long. He did not look at her. "I will," he said. "Not I do, I will." The difference moved through the church like a shift in the wind. Quiet at first, then gathering. A murmur rose along the pews, low and unsettled, like cattle sensing a storm before it breaks. Lila's fingers tightened around the wilted stems of the wild roses she held. A petal broke loose and fell to the floor between her boots. She looked at it for a long moment. The pastor hesitated, just enough for it to be noticed. Then he pressed on, voice louder now, filling the space that had gone thin. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." The words landed heavy, like a door closing. Caleb stepped forward. He did not reach for her at once, only stood there, close enough that she could feel the presence of him. Heat, weight, something solid that did not move unless it chose to. Then, slowly, he extended his arm. Lila stared at it. This was the moment everyone watched for, the moment that made it real. Her hand lifted before she could think better of it. It hovered there, uncertain, caught between what she had been told and what she wanted. 3 heartbeats. 4. Then her fingers settled lightly against his sleeve. Even through the fabric, she felt the strength beneath it. Not tight, not pulling. Just there. They turned together. The walk down the aisle felt longer than it had before. Each board sounded louder beneath their steps. Each breath seemed to echo off the walls. Outside, the light hit hard. Dry Creek spread out under a pale sky, the dirt road cutting through it like a scar. Wagons stood lined along the edge, horses shifting, leather creaking in the heat. Caleb helped her down the church steps without a word. His hand brushed her elbow. Lila flinched. It happened before she could stop it. A quick pull away, like touching something that might burn. Caleb's hand dropped back at once. He did not reach again. For a moment, neither of them moved. Wind lifted the edge of her veil, brushing it against her cheek. Dust swirled low along the ground, catching in the folds of her dress. From behind them, the church doors opened. Voices spilled out, quiet but eager, already carrying the story forward. Caleb turned toward the wagon. He climbed up first, then stepped aside, leaving space for her. No hand offered this time. No expectation in the way he stood. Lila gathered her skirt and pulled herself up. The wooden seat was warm from the sun. She sat stiff, hands folded tight in her lap. Caleb took the reins. Leather tightened. The horses shifted, then moved forward at a steady pull. The church grew smaller behind them. No one waved. No one called after them. Dry Creek faded into a blur of dust and low roofs, then into open land where the wind ran free across the dry grass. Lila did not look back. She kept her eyes on the road ahead, watching the thin line where earth met sky. Beside her, Caleb said nothing. His gaze stayed forward, fixed on something she could not see. The wagon rolled on, wheels grinding against the hard ground, carrying them both toward a place neither of them spoke of. And in the space between them, quiet settled in. Not empty. Not yet. Just waiting. The wagon rolled until the land began to rise, the road narrowing between low ridges where scrub pine clung to the earth. The sky turned a dull amber as the sun slipped down behind the hills. By the time Caleb slowed the horses, the light had gone soft and thin. Iron Ridge Ranch stood ahead, larger than anything Lila had expected. A 2-story house, weathered but solid, its porch stretching wide across the front. A lantern burned beside the door, steady in the evening wind. Beyond it, she could make out the long shape of the barn, the fence lines running far into the darkening land. Caleb pulled the reins. The horses settled. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he climbed down and walked around the wagon. He stopped to step back, not reaching for her. Lila gathered her skirt and stepped down on her own. The ground felt different here, firmer, packed from years of work and weather. The air smelled of wood smoke and something else. Coffee, maybe, lingering from inside. Caleb took the reins again and led the horses toward the side pen. "Doors open," he said, voice low, almost lost in the wind. That was all. Lila stood there a moment longer before turning toward the house. The porch boards gave under her weight, but not like the church floor. These were cared for, repaired. Each nail set straight, each plank held firm. She pushed the door open. Warm air met her first. The room inside was clean, but not soft. A table stood near the window, two chairs placed with careful distance between them. A cast-iron stove rested along the far wall, a kettle already set on top. The faint ticking of it filled the quiet. No pictures, no lace. Nothing that asked to be noticed, just things that worked. A woman stood near the stove, turning as Lila stepped inside. Her hair had gone gray long ago, pulled tight at the back. Her hands were still, steady. She looked at Lila the way one might look at a new piece of furniture brought into a room, taking measure, not asking questions. "Martha Green," she said after a moment. "I keep the place in order." Lila nodded. "Lila." Martha's gaze moved over the dress, the dust at the hem, the way Lila held her hands together. She said nothing about it. "Your room's upstairs," Martha went on. "Second door to the right." She turned back to the stove, lifting the kettle without another word. Lila hesitated, then moved toward the stairs. Each step creaked softly under her weight. The hallway above was narrow, the walls plain. She found the door and pushed it open. The room was small. A bed stood against the far wall, quilt folded neat. A single chair near the window. A wash basin set on a wooden stand. Everything placed with purpose. Nothing extra. She stepped inside slowly. The window faced east. Even in the fading light, she could see the line of the hills stretching out beyond the yard. Then she noticed the lock. It was new. Clean metal set into old wood. Lila reached out and touched it. Cold under her fingers. Behind her, a step sounded in the hall. She turned. Caleb stood in the doorway, not inside, just there. "Your room," he said. "You can lock it if you need." His voice carried no weight beyond the words, no demand, no expectation. Lila nodded. He lingered a moment, as if there were something else he might say. Then he stepped back. "Food's downstairs," he added, "whenever you're ready." The floor creaked once more as he walked away. Lila stood there, listening until the sound faded. Then she turned the key. The click echoed louder than it should have. Downstairs, she heard a chair scrape across the floor, the low clink of a cup set on wood. Then nothing. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in the dress. The roses slipped from her hand and fell to the floor. Outside, the wind moved through the fence posts, a long, hollow sound that filled the gaps between everything else. It took her a while to change. She folded the dress carefully and set it on the chair, smoothing the worn lace with her fingers. Then she washed her hands in the basin, watching the dust cloud the water before settling. When she came down, the table was set. One plate, one cup. A second chair had been pulled out, just enough to notice. The food was simple: bread, beans, a small cut of salted pork. Steam still rose from it. Caleb was not there. Lila sat slowly. The chair felt heavier than it should. She ate in silence, the only sound the faint scrape of her spoon against the bowl. Outside, something shifted in the yard. A gate, maybe, or a horse moving in the pen. When she finished, she left the dishes where they were. She wasn't sure what else to do. Upstairs, she locked the door again. The night stretched long. She lay on the bed, eyes open, listening to the house settle around her. Once she heard footsteps below, slow, measured, then the sound of a door closing. No one knocked. At some point, she slept. When she woke, light was already pressing through the window. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she saw the dress on the chair, the lock on the door, the room that wasn't hers. She rose and crossed the floor quietly, Her hand hovered over the key before she turned it. The door opened with a soft creak. Something sat on the floor just outside. A small bundle wrapped in cloth. Lila bent and picked it up. Inside was a loaf of bread, still warm, the crust firm beneath her fingers. A tin cup rested beside it, filled with coffee. Steam curled up in thin lines, disappearing into the cool morning air. No note, no sound. She stepped into the hall, looking toward the stairs. Nothing. The house below was quiet. Lila stood there a long moment, the warmth of the bread in her hands. Then she turned back into her room and closed the door. Not locked this time, just closed. She sat by the window, breaking off a piece of bread. Outside, the ranch had already come to life. A figure moved near the barn, broad shoulders, steady hands, working without pause. Caleb Ward did not look up, and from where she sat, Lila Harper did not call out. But she watched, longer than she meant to, until the coffee cooled in her hands and the morning had fully taken hold. Then she looked down at the bread again and ate. The days settled into a pattern that didn't ask for her permission. Morning came early at Iron Ridge. The light slid over the hills and into the kitchen before the clock on the wall finished its slow ticking. By the time Lila stepped downstairs, the coffee was already there. Not fresh from the fire, but still warm enough to steam when she lifted the lid. No one handed it to her. It was simply there. She began to notice the small things first. A chair pulled back just enough before she reached the table. A window unlatched to let air through where she stood most often. A stack of firewood cut and set by the door before the cold could settle in. Nothing said. Nothing explained. Caleb worked outside most of the day. The sound of hammer on post carried through the walls, steady and even. Sometimes she watched him from the window. He moved like a man used to long hours. No wasted steps, no pause that wasn't needed. He never looked toward the house, not that she saw. Martha spoke little, but she watched everything. Once, when Lila set the bread to rise too close to the stove, Martha shifted it back with a quiet hand. "He don't like it burnt," she said. Lila glanced up. "Does he say that?" Martha shook her head. "He don't say much of anything." Then she went back to her work. By the fifth day, Lila found herself listening for the sound of his boots in the yard. Not waiting. Just noticing. That morning, Silas Dunn came through the back door without knocking, carrying a coil of rope over his shoulder. He tipped his hat to Lila, then set the rope by the wall. "Ma'am?" he said, voice rough from dust and years. Lila nodded. Silas glanced toward the window, where Caleb worked near the fence line. "He'll be needing supplies come Saturday," he said, half to her, half to the room. "Town trip." Martha didn't look up. "Then he'll go." Silas shrugged and stepped back outside. Lila stood still for a moment after he left. Town. The word felt heavier than it should. By Saturday, the sky had turned a clear, hard blue, the kind that carried no promise of rain. Caleb stood by the wagon, tightening the harness straps, his coat folded over the seat. Lila stepped onto the porch. He paused, just long enough to notice her. "I'm heading into Dry Creek," he said. "Need flour, salt." She nodded. He adjusted the reins, waited. Lila looked past him toward the road. It stretched long and empty, the same way it had the day they left the church. "I'll come," she said. The words surprised her as much as him. Caleb's hand stilled on the leather strap. He studied her a moment, then gave a small nod. "All right." The ride into town was quiet. The wheels rolled steady over the packed dirt, the same rhythm as before, but it felt different now. Lila sat straighter, watched more closely. Dry Creek came into view slowly. First the roof lines, then the hitching posts, then the narrow strip of buildings that made up the whole of it. People noticed. They always did. A few men stood outside the general store, cups in hand, talking low. Their voices faded when the wagon pulled in. One of them leaned back against the post, watching. Lila stepped down from the wagon before Caleb could move. The boards of the walkway felt familiar under her boots. Inside, the store smelled of flour and lamp oil. Shelves lined with sacks, jars, folded cloth. Mrs. Carter stood behind the counter, her eyes moving quickly from Caleb to Lila and back again. "Mr. Ward?" she said, polite enough. "Ma'am." Her smile thinned just slightly as she looked at Lila. "You'll be needing supplies?" Caleb gave a short nod. "Flour, sugar, salt." Mrs. Carter moved to gather them. Lila stayed near the door. A voice came from behind her. "Well now." Walter Briggs stepped in from the street, hat tilted low, a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. He leaned one shoulder against the frame, looking her over like he had time to spare. "That'd be her then," he said. "The new Mrs. Ward." No one answered. Walter's gaze shifted to Caleb. "Heard you settled your debts a different way." The room held still. Lila felt it again, the weight of eyes, the quiet that waited to see what would happen next. Caleb didn't raise his voice. He set the sack of flour on the counter, turned slowly. "If you've got something to say," he said, "say it to me." Walter's grin faltered, just for a second. Then he let out a short laugh. "Didn't mean anything by it." "Then don't," Caleb said. Nothing more. No threat. No step forward. But the space shifted. Walter straightened, adjusted his hat. "No harm done," he muttered, and stepped back outside. The room breathed again. Mrs. Carter finished tying the sacks. "That'll be $2.10, she said, her voice careful now. Caleb paid without looking at her. When they stepped back onto the street, the men by the post had found something else to look at. Lila climbed into the wagon without a word. They rode out of town the same way they came in, dust rising behind them, the sound of wheels turning steady. After a while, Lila spoke. "You didn't have to do that." Caleb kept his eyes on the road. "Do what?" "Say anything." He flicked the reins lightly. "Didn't say much." She looked at him. For the first time, he turned his head just slightly. Not fully. Just enough. "That's the point," he said. The rest of the ride passed in silence. That evening, the table was set for two. Lila sat at one end, Caleb at the other. Between them, a pot of beans, a plate of bread, and the low sound of the clock marking time. He reached for the bread first, broke a piece, set it on his plate. "Your baking smells good," he said. Lila paused. She hadn't expected that. He hadn't even tasted it. She nodded once, then reached for her own plate. The spoon touched the bowl, a small sound in a quiet room. But something had shifted, not broken, not yet. Just moved. And when Lila glanced up just once, she found him already looking away, like he had seen enough for now, and no more. The wind turned that night. It came down from the ridge, sharp and sudden, rattling the loose edge of the roof and pushing against the walls like it had something to prove. By the time Lila stepped away from the table, the first drop of rain struck the window hard enough to leave a mark. Then another. Then many. The sky opened without warning. Rain fell in sheets, heavy and slanted, turning the yard into a blur of gray and movement. Somewhere outside, a gate slammed. The horses shifted, their hooves striking wood and dirt in restless rhythm. Caleb was already moving. He pulled his coat from the peg, shrugged into it, and stepped out into the storm without a word. The door shut behind him with a hard, hollow sound. Lila stood in the kitchen, listening. The wind pushed against the house again, stronger now. The lamp flickered once, twice, then went out. Darkness settled fast. Lila reached for the table, steadying herself as the room shifted into shadow. The only light came in quick flashes from the sky beyond the window, white and brief, showing the outline of the chairs, the stove, the doorway. Then nothing again. She waited. The sound of the storm filled everything. Rain on the roof, wind through the cracks, the low groan of wood under strain. The door opened. Caleb stepped back inside, soaked through, water running from his coat onto the floorboards. He shut the door with his shoulder and stood there a moment, breathing steady. "Storm came in fast," he said, as if that explained it. He moved toward the hearth and knelt, striking a match. The flame caught once, then died. He tried again. This time it held, small and stubborn, long enough to catch the dry edge of kindling. The fire came slowly. A dull orange glow first, then a small flame, then more. The room filled with a low, shifting light. Lila stepped closer without thinking. The cold had settled in while she stood in the dark. She wrapped her arms around herself, fingers gripping the fabric at her sleeves. Caleb noticed. He stood, pulled off his coat, then the thick wool sweater beneath it. Without stepping closer than he needed to, he held it out. "Put it on," he said. "I'm fine," she answered, but her voice didn't hold. He didn't argue, just waited. The wind pressed against the walls again, harder this time. The fire shifted, throwing shadows across his face. "You're shaking," he said. Lila looked down. She was. After a moment, she took the sweater. It was warm, still holding the heat from his body. The weight of it settled over her shoulders, heavier than she expected. She didn't thank him. He didn't ask. They sat on opposite sides of the fire. The storm went on. Water ran in thin lines down the window glass. The wind dropped for a moment, then came back again, stronger, like a breath pulled deep and let go all at once. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The fire cracked softly between them. At some point, Lila lifted her eyes. Caleb sat with his elbows on his knees, hands clasped, staring into the flame like he was waiting for it to say something back. "You don't have to be afraid here," he said, not looking at her. The words stayed in the air, simple. Nothing added to them. Lila watched him a moment longer, then looked back at the fire. The storm passed sometime near dawn. The rain softened first, then the wind. Then only the slow drip from the edge of the roof remained. When Lila woke, the house felt different, quieter. The fire had burned down to ash. A thin line of light slipped under her door. She rose slowly, the sweater still around her shoulders. The floor felt colder now. She stepped into the hall. No bundle waited this time. No bread, no coffee. The kitchen stood empty. A chair pulled slightly back from the table. A cup left near the edge, still half full, a faint ring marking where it had been set down. Lila moved toward the table. Something caught her eye. The drawer. It sat just a little open. Not enough to be noticed at first glance. Just enough that it didn't sit flush with the wood. She hesitated, then reached out. The wood slid easily beneath her hand. Inside lay a folded set of papers. Nothing else. Lila lifted them. The paper was thick, official. Edges clean, not worn like the things around it. She opened it slowly. Her name stood there. Lila Harper. Clear. Inked dark against the page. Below it, the description of land. Boundaries marked in careful lines. acreage written in firm script. 250 acres. She read it again. Then once more. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the paper. Footsteps sounded outside. Voices. Low. Familiar. She moved toward the window, the paper still in her hand. Caleb stood near the barn with Silas Dunn. The two men spoke quietly, heads bent slightly toward one another. "The debt's cleared," Caleb said. Silas nodded. "Town'll still talk." "Let them." Silas shifted his weight. "You sure about putting it in her name?" A pause. Caleb looked out over the land, not toward the house. "It was always hers," he said. The words carried, not loud, but enough. Lila stood still. The paper trembled slightly in her hands. Outside, the morning stretched wide and clean after the storm. The sky washed pale, the earth darkened where the rain had settled. Inside, the room felt smaller somehow, closer. She looked down at the paper again, at her name, at the land she had never owned, at the space between what she had been told and what had been done. No one had said anything to her, no explanation, no moment of offering. Just this, left where she could find it. Lila folded the paper slowly, set it back in the drawer, closed it. The wood slid into place with a soft, final sound. She stood there a long time after, not moving, not speaking, only listening to the quiet that followed the storm. And for the first time since the church, something inside her shifted, not broken, not healed, just opened. The day carried on like any other. That was the strangest part of it. The sun climbed. The ground dried where the storm had passed. The wind settled into something softer, moving through the grass instead of against it. Caleb worked the fence line again, hammer striking wood in the same steady rhythm as before. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had. Lila moved through the house slower that morning. She wiped the table twice without meaning to. Set a cup down, then moved it again. The drawer stayed closed. She didn't open it again. By noon, she had folded what little she owned into a small cloth bag. 2 dresses, a pair of stockings, the worn comb she kept wrapped in linen. Nothing that tied her to the place beyond what she could carry. She set the bag by the door, sat beside it, waited. Outside, Caleb crossed the yard once, then again, carrying a plank over his shoulder. He paused near the gate, speaking to Silas, then moved on without looking toward the house. Lila watched him through the window. A long moment, then she stood. The bag felt lighter than it should. She stepped onto the porch. The boards held firm beneath her feet. The same boards she had noticed on her first day, the same ones that had not given under her weight. Caleb saw her then, not because she called, just because she was there. He set the plank down slowly, walked toward her, each step measured. No hurry in it, no hesitation either. He stopped at the bottom of the steps. Lila held the strap of her bag tighter. "I found the papers," she said. He nodded once. "All right." "That land," she stopped. The words didn't come as easily as she thought they would. "It's mine." "Yes." No explanation followed. No reason given. Just the truth, set plain between them. Lila looked past him, out toward the stretch of land beyond the fence. It rolled wide and open, the kind of space a person could disappear into if they wanted. "You didn't have to do that," she said. Caleb rested his hands at his sides. "Wasn't mine to keep." The wind shifted. Lila let out a breath she hadn't noticed she was holding. "I wrote something," she said after a moment. He waited. "I thought I'd leave." He nodded again. Not surprised. Not hurt. Just accepting. You can, he said. Anytime. The words landed soft. No weight behind them. No pull. Lila's fingers tightened around the strap. That's it? She asked. Caleb met her eyes then. Forcing you to stay wouldn't change what this is, he said, and it wouldn't make it right. Silence settled between them. Not empty. Full. Lila looked down at the bag, at the thin fabric, the small shape of everything she owned, then back at him. You stood in that store, she said quietly. You didn't have to. He shrugged, just slightly. Didn't like what I heard. You said I wasn't something to trade. You're not. Lila stepped down from the porch. The distance between them closed to nothing. Close enough now that she could see the faint line along his jaw, the way his hands stayed still at his sides, like he was careful not to move too quickly. I don't understand you, she said. You don't have to. Another pause. The wind moved through the grass again, bending it low, then letting it rise. Lila lowered the bag, set it on the ground, didn't pick it back up. If I stay, she said slowly, it won't be because I have nowhere else to go. Caleb held her gaze. Then don't stay for that, he answered. It'll be because I choose to. A long moment passed. He nodded once. All right. Lila bent, picked up the bag again, then turned, stepped back onto the porch, and carried it inside. The door remained open behind her. Caleb didn't follow right away. He stood there, looking at the space where she had been, then at the open doorway, as if making sure it was real. Inside, Lila set the bag by the wall, not hidden, not packed away, just there. When Caleb stepped inside a moment later, he paused near the table. She stood by the window, her back to him, watching the light settle across the yard. Neither of them spoke. He moved to the chair, pulled it out slightly, then stopped, looked at her instead. Lila turned. Their eyes met. No distance this time. No looking away. I stayed, she said. Caleb's mouth shifted, just barely. Something close to a smile, though it didn't fully form. That's enough, he said. Evening came slow. The sky turned gold along the ridge, then deepened into something softer. Lila stepped outside once more, this time without the bag. Caleb stood near the edge of the field, a shovel in his hands. She walked toward him, stopped beside him. What are you doing? She asked. He pressed the blade into the dirt. Ground's good here. Thought about planting something come spring. Lila looked down at the earth. Darker now after the rain. Softer. Trees, he added. Apple, maybe. She crouched, touched the soil with her fingers. It gave under her hand. They'll take time, she said. Caleb leaned on the handle of the shovel. That's all right. Lila brushed the dirt from her palm. Then we'll wait, she said. He looked at her. Really looked. The wind passed through again, carrying the scent of wet earth and something new beginning beneath it. Behind them, the house stood quiet. The door still open. No lock turned. No barrier set. Just space. And for the first time since the church, it didn't feel like something closing in. It felt like something opening out. Far beyond the fence line, the land stretched wide under the fading light, and for once neither of them looked away. If you had stood there where Lila stood, with everything behind you already gone, and everything ahead of you still uncertain, would you have stayed, or would you have walked? There's a kind of silence that can break a person, And there's another kind, the kind that waits, patient and steady, until you're ready to hear something true inside it. Caleb never asked her to love him. He never tried to hold her in place. He just gave her something most people never think to offer: space to choose. And sometimes, that's the one thing that can turn fear into something else, something quieter, something that grows. Not all love comes rushing in. Some of it stands still. Some of it keeps the door open and lets you decide if you want to walk through. And maybe that's the part that stays with you. Not the storm, not the deal that brought them together, but the moment she realized she wasn't trapped and chose to stay anyway. If you've ever had to choose between leaving and staying, I'd like to know what you would have done. You can tell me in the comments. And if stories like this feel close to something you've lived, there are more waiting just ahead. Quiet ones, strong ones, the kind that stay with you long after they're told.